Welcome, everyone, to RCR TV and the U2U Connect show. I'm Limor Schaffman, show host. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. What we're going to be talking about is augmented reality and this new fantastic conference that's going to be coming up next week in Santa Clara, the conference, Augmented World Expo. And with me is Ori Inbar. He is the co-founder and CEO of AugmentedReality.org, a non-for-profit geared specifically to advancing augmented reality, and they are the producers of AWE. So Ori, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Limor. It's great to be here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what AugmentedReality.org is all about and this upcoming conference?
Okay, so AugmentedReality.org was founded about 6-7 years ago when I kind of got into the space and I got really excited about it, but I felt like it's such an early stage. We need to bring all the players in the industry together and help advance this field. And that's how this organization was founded, with 3 goals: to help connect people, educate people, and help advance startups in the space. And we set up this ambitious goal to have 1 billion augmented reality users by the end of the decade, kind of our moonshot. So that's kind of helping align everybody. And so far, it's been great. We've been producing the largest events in the field and working with a lot of startups in the space. So it's been my dream job since then.
And what brought you to this in the first place? How did you you have quite a varied background, but something must have drawn you to augmented reality itself. What was it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a few startups and also in a large corporation for several years. And it was great, but then I decided to leave and spend time with the kids, as they say. And I realized that my children are always in front of a screen, watching TV, playing video games, or on the internet. And they weren't experiencing the real world like I did as a kid. So I thought, how can we extract some of the things that attract kids to video games and internet and bring it into the real world, the physical world? And I thought I invented something new, but of course, when I did some research, I realized there's a weird computer science term called augmented reality, which has been around for almost 40 years. But it's been hidden in labs, So the mission became really to find a way to bring it to everybody, to the masses. And ever since, that was my passion.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of what you are seeing, so actually, let's talk a little bit more about the conference before we even dig into these questions, because I'm really interested in the business of augmented reality. So what kind of companies, what's the ecosystem around augmented reality right now, and how are they going to be coming together at this conference?
It's a good one. I mean, what's really interesting about where we are today with augmented reality is that it's really in the kind of about to turn into the hockey stick of jumping and kind of taking all industries by storm. And when we started the conference and when I got into the space, it was very few people were there, mostly startups and visionaries. But if you look at the market today, the ecosystem, you have all the big players that have jumped in, most of them, starting with Qualcomm and Sony and Epson and Microsoft recently and Intel in a big way, and a bunch of other big, large computer manufacturer or consumer electronic goods. So you have those, but then a bunch of startups which are constantly innovating both on hardware, smart glasses, as well as other types of devices, as well as creating tools and solutions and content. So now I think we have a pretty extensive ecosystem now in place, and a lot of it is going to play out at the conference next week.
So tell us a little bit about what these larger companies are looking for. I mean, startups, there's so much to be built around this space. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the larger companies, I'm actually curious. I mean, is it Qualcomm and Intel? Okay, it's the chips. Epson, what is it for them?
So yeah, I mean, like I said, Qualcomm and Epson, they realize this is the next big computing wave. And mm-hmm. Intel especially, they kind of missed mobile. And they're throwing everything they have at the wearables and smart glasses and AR because they don't want to miss that cycle as well. But for other Epson, they have projectors, right? I mean, except for printers, they also have a projector business, mm-hmm. which they have managed to miniaturize to really small projectors. And they say, okay, how can we use it? Then they realize they can put it in smart glasses, and it could be kind of a very near-eye display that could replace those big displays out there. So that's kind of their angle. For Google, it was, you know, searching information. Now you can search the world, not just text, all right, and not just on the web itself. So that was kind of their angle, and with Android, it was kind of a natural way to extend it to smart glasses. And you know, so they all have their own angles, but I think it's driven partly by fear of missing out on this next big computing wave, and partly just because there's this huge opportunity to really change the way people interact with the world and make them better at anything they do.
So let's talk about the business, and let's talk about where you're seeing the opportunities. So at the moment, right now, here today, since some people might be thinking that augmented reality is a relatively new sector of the industry, but as you said, at least the terminology and the exploration of it has been around for the past 40 years. What do you see happening today with regard to augmented reality, and where are the marketplaces that are the most active and the most profitable?
So yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it's still unknown is crazy, because AR is currently being implemented, whether it's on tablets and mobile devices or on smart glasses, in many Fortune 1000 companies. And they've realized that there's basically no other way to solve certain business problems with another technology. And kind of, I think the overarching factor here is, whenever you have a worker that is performing a certain task, whether it's fixing a machine or trying to to operate an electronic board, or on an oil rig somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and they need information in their field of view, they don't have the ability to open, you know, books with manuals or even a tablet because their hands are tied. That's where smart glasses, especially in augmented reality, solves a very important problem. And in those cases, they're starting to implement smart glasses on a larger scale. So last year, we've seen some pilots and some experiments, and many of them were super successful. They actually were showing 20% to 30% improvement in productivity, in safety, in engagement, and so on. And now they're kind of starting to move into large-scale deployments, and that's happening in manufacturing and industrial applications, in utilities, in medical. Medical, I think it's one of the most fascinating, because one example is smart glasses that give nurses X-ray vision, actually, so they can actually see your veins through the skin, and when they take IV, they never miss anymore. So it's really enabling workers in various fields in a way that were not possible before.
That's absolutely fascinating. I can't even imagine. It's truly X-ray vision. So Superman or Superwoman have come now to reality because of augmented reality. So now let's talk about industries that have not quite realized the potential. Who do you think out there that could be listening to this show before they even think about going to this conference should start paying attention because they're not quite realizing the potential? Are you seeing some industries that are just not quite paying attention yet, but yet you see a lot of opportunity there for them?
So I say actually, practically in any industry, there is some form of interest. In some cases, it's startups that just kind of trying to push it up the stream. But it's in training and maintenance, in education is big. In gaming, I think that's kind of an area where it's almost a natural extension. That's kind of the next wave to interact with in gaming and immersive experiences. And it turns out that the gaming industry is a bit more conservative than we all thought. And they're like their existing platforms. They don't like to kind of jump ahead. So I think in a sense they're a little bit behind. But again, I think it's really taking hold in every aspect of life and work.
Let's talk about gaming, because actually I would think I completely agree. I mean, you have augmented reality as part of a natural extension. And you mentioned Google earlier. They have Niantic and they have Endgame, which they're currently developing. So how do you see, and you have your own experience in the gaming space, so, and in augmented gaming, I think it was augmented reality gaming. So how do you see that development happening? And I'm going to throw another one in there because I think this is also relevant to gaming in an extension, but also augmented reality and IoT, Internet of Things. So I think these three things are going to be coming together. What do you see as some of the trends right now, and how do you see things happening over the next 5 to 10 years?
In gaming? Yeah, so...
Yes.
Yeah, so in gaming, on one hand, again, it feels like this is kind of a natural area for this technology to evolve, and especially because when you design games for a new technology, you can overcome some of the challenges of the technology with clever game design, right? But what we've seen, and I founded a startup called Augmento, which was focusing on augmented reality games, and we had some really nice successes, a lot of great interest, but we also felt like gamers, they actually expect the games and the experiences to be perfect, on one hand. The second thing is that kids, although, you would think that you want to get them off the couch and, on the street and kind of to interact with the real world, it's hard. I know that from my own children. I mean, when I asked my son to kind of test some of my games, he said, or my daughter, she said, will I have to move? And said, yes, that's exactly the purpose of this. So it's kind of challenging, but I think we're starting to kind of overcome that, and new platforms that are coming out, new headsets that are really geared for gaming and are delivering some amazing experiences. And companies like Valve, one of the biggest players in the gaming space, which have jumped into virtual reality, kind of a cousin of augmented reality. I think that's going to help drive that adoption as well.
And actually, let's talk about some confluence and differentiation between augmented reality, alternative reality, and virtual reality in terms of gaming, just because I think they are going to interchange a little bit or a lot. Can you explain this to a little bit? And also, how do you think, all coming back to augmented reality, how might these other spheres of gaming, you talked a little bit about VR, but how about alternative reality games? How might they take advantage of augmented reality technologies?
Okay. So just to put things in order. So there's AR and VR. VR is when you put basically an opaque screen in front of your face. You're completely disconnected from your environment, and you're transported into a different world, whether it's too dangerous, too expensive, or impossible to get into that world. So you escape reality. With augmented reality, you actually stay exactly where you are. You still see everything around you, the people, the things that you're doing, and you just augment it with a little bit of overlay of graphics to enhance whatever you're doing right now, whether it's a game or a task. So in that sense, they're very similar, sometimes confusing, but they're very different in a way that you use it. It's kind of like the difference between dreams and reality, right? In dreams, you can do anything. You transport it into somewhere else. In reality, you can maybe also do everything, but it's more limited and it's more grounded in the real world. Now, alternate reality games is kind of, I think it's a different dimension. It could be applied to both worlds. You could also play a game just by reading a book. You don't need any technology for alternate reality games. So it's kind of its own sphere, and it's just imagining a world where it's not our own world, but it could still happen in the real world, right?
Right.
So kind of a different take on this kind of thing. And that, again, technology is not a barrier for this kind of game. You can do it in many, many ways.
Right. Yes, and I appreciate the explanation of those three. I just think, again, that alternative, I guess, what, I was just at a Comic-Con this past weekend, and again, the writer and also the developer at Google for Endgame were there. And it was just really fascinating. I can just sort of see how different kinds of augmented reality technologies could play a role in enhancing the alternate reality game that they're developing, and just make it even more intriguing and mysterious and stuff like that. But let's talk about those additional technologies. So the Internet of Things, here we are, another style of having this world around us that is going to be interacting with us increasingly. So how do you see augmented reality and the Internet of Things and those technologies combining? And what are you seeing in terms of technologies? Maybe a couple of specific, interesting ones that you would like to highlight that, again, we might be able to see at the coming expo.
Sure. So I think we're kind of moving away from the PC era, right? I mean, desktop computers, laptop computers are going to be kind of this old thing that nobody uses anymore. We're now kind of using mobile devices, which is kind of a step towards the future. But the future is really where there are no computers. We just interact with the world in a natural way. And that requires three things. One is wearables. So, it could be a headset, a smart glass. It could be things you wear, bracelets or rings or all sorts of things that allow you to communicate, kind of a new way of interact, not keyboard or mouse anymore. The second piece is the Internet of Things. So all those sensors and things around you in objects or in places that understand you. They know that you're coming, they know who you are, they know what you want to do, and it allows you to communicate with the world around you in a more natural way. And augmented reality is sort of, or virtual reality is kind of the medium, right? It's the interface between the wearables and the world around you. So I think these three elements are really going to be necessary for this next computing wave, which I don't know how we're going to call it. It's maybe the interaction age, or maybe it's the experience age, but it's something completely different, and we're just in the beginning right now trying to invent this new language to really understand what it is.
And do you have a couple of technologies that you think are particularly cool in this area? Because I guess also I'm thinking about the movies, of course, because they send so much of the sci-fi or the high tech that comes out of that actually becomes a reality in the near future. And so, for example, the contact lenses, which are allowing, the most extensive level of perhaps head-mounted display that just coming straight to the eyes. Is that a technology already out there, or what other cool technologies are you seeing that is good fun for us to know about?
So I think there are a couple of steps. So the first way to introduce augmented reality to the masses was with the iPhone and Android phones. That was 2008 and 2009. That was amazing because up until then, nobody was able to experience this unless you had like this big backpack and big helmet with a head-mounted display. So that was kind of first step to get in. But now, and especially this year, 2015 is the first year where we have over 10, actually I think it's 15 smart glasses, which are being sold to the market. So we can actually go to Amazon or to the store and buy those glasses and start experiencing augmented reality in your field of view. And I think that's like a super important year for everybody, and especially for the AR space. Contact lenses, there are some experiments where they're making it work, but I think it's probably 10 or 15 years away until we're going to start seeing that in action. But there's something in between, and that is, without scaring anybody, but it's a new form of smart glasses that instead of projecting an image on the lens in front of your eye, it actually projects right into your retina.
Oh, right. Right.
So you basically have, those projectors that we talked about that scan your retina, and kind of like you would scan a TV in the old days to kind of paint all the pixels. It will do the same thing, but on your retina. And it sounds a little scary, but it's really very low intensity, and I think we're going to get used to it pretty quickly because the advantage over the current generation of technology is so big. It can give you almost infinite resolution, perfect brightness. It can solve a lot of the issues of focus, which are problematic on a lens that is really near your eye. And I think companies like Magic Leap, iWay, and others are working on this kind of technology. It's probably a couple of years away before we'll see that as a product, but that's super fascinating. It's going to change how we perceive smart glasses.
Fascinating. I can't wait. I don't know that I'm going to be the first person to test it out, but I can't wait to try it out after some medical research. And actually, so because we're dealing with the telecom industry, we are RCR TV here. What would you like to see? What should the telecom and mobile industries be aware of with regard to augmented reality, and also some of the needs of what you have? And I'm thinking big data and the big data management, what they can capture, also infrastructure, what are some infrastructure needs, perhaps some device development needs. What do you see? How does the telecom industry play in this space, and how could it play very effectively with you guys?
So I think, as we said before, it's really about interacting with the world around you and objects and places. And, you walk into your home or an unknown place, and it immediately understands you and interacts with you. And that requires kind of a whole new architecture, if you will, of communication. So we envision people will have kind of their own firewall. So when you walk on the street, you have all these things around you communicating, your smart glasses with maybe you still have a smartphone in your pocket to do all the heavy lifting and the battery, but you have also some rings and bracelets that allow you to communicate. So all of that will have to communicate with each other, but then also communicate with things around you. So you have to these devices will have to tell the room that you're getting into, the office, the whatever it is, who you are and what you want to share and what not to share. So I think in terms of communication, there's a lot of work to really kind of move to that new world, the new concept of how communication is happening, and that's going to be big. And then data, you're right. I mean, data is, if we think today we have a lot of data, it's going to be a joke compared to what we have in a few years, when billions of sensors are out there all over the place collecting data constantly. Understanding this data is going to be kind of mining it and understanding it is going to be a huge driving factor for big industries and big companies.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the big themes that you anticipate having come out at the expo coming up right now? Because I'm thinking about big data. I'm trying to see, like, what are some of the companies that are out there and that are looking at this right now that may not be paying attention. And I have a feeling that probably some big data companies don't realize they should be going to this conference. So what are some of the things that you anticipate seeing discussed? And what is the vision that you're aiming towards in another 15 or 20 years? What's going to be the thing that when this is attained, you'll be like, wow, I've done my job. We've gotten here. This is the zenith of the vision that I have for augmented reality.
Wow, it's a big question. So in terms of the themes for the event, we have we're looking at three key themes. One is superpowers to the people. And when you go to our website, you'll see that immediately. It's all over the place. It's kind of fun. It's attractive, but it's also fundamental to these technologies and how they're changing us as humans. We kind of touch on some of these superpowers, like the nurse with X-ray vision, but think about a field technician that basically has teleporting as well as telekinesis capabilities through AR and sensors that they can interact with without touching. And also super knowledge, because now all the books in the world are in their field of view, so they can get that information instantly and master things right away. So superpower is really about how these technologies, AR, VR, wearables, IoT, are enabling us to be better at anything we do, whether it's work or life. And that's a big one. The second one is it's kind of the first time that we brought together the AR and VR sides of the coin. And it's interesting that in the last few years, although these two may seem very similar, very close, they've been running in parallel tracks, different communities, different events, different companies. And this is the first time where we brought it together. We partnered with Upload VR, which is some of the strongest voices in the VR space. So they created the whole track and whole VR experience area. So we're kind of bringing those two worlds together, and it will culminate in a debate whether the future is augmented or virtual. And of course, the answer is both, but we use that opportunity to educate people about the differences as well as the similarities between those two worlds, and with the idea that if we join forces, we can help advance this field in a better way. And the third theme is that this is not a vision for the future anymore. This is not something that may happen sometime. It's actually happening right now. Fortune 1000 companies are implementing it. As we speak, we have over 15 smart glasses being sold in the market as products. And all these implementations are real. So it's those days where we were talking about what may happen one day or some prototypes or ideas are gone. We're actually in the midst of it right now. And I don't look 10, 15 years in the future. Our goal was for 2020. We wanted to see 1 billion users using it by 2020. I think we're well on our way. We predict that we're probably going to hit this number before 2020. So we're super happy, and in a sense, you could look at it as an inflection point where we sell more smart glasses than smartphones, and that will show that we actually transition completely to the next wave, and that's going to happen pretty soon.
Fantastic. And actually, I think one of the key elements of making that happen is not just the devices, but also the software, the experiences themselves. So what kind of applications do you see being developed? What kind of experiences are being created for the users?
So, I mean, obviously, there, like in any ecosystem, you have the different layers on the hardware, and then on the software, you have the tools makers, the SDKs, the operating systems, and then the services and the applications. And you know, we're seeing the same thing here, where different companies focus on different areas. And if initially, you know, one company had to do everything, and now you can start specializing, and we're seeing that happening right now. I think a big area is the whole idea of interaction. As we said before, you know, we're not going to use keyboards or mice anymore. We're going to use voice as a way to communicate. We're going to use gestures. We're going to use gaze tracking to kind of tell the computer what we're interested in. We're going to use bracelets like the Mayo armband that allows you to kind of track your muscles and understand what you're trying to do. Even EEG devices on your that kind of track your brain waves as a way to tell the computer what you want to do. So, and that is like a wild west right now. There's maybe 7, 8, 10 different ways to do that, and each one may be relevant for a different kind of use case. But I think it's going to be up to the industry to really figure out what this new communication language is. It's kind of like, you know, the movie industry in 1903. You know, the camera was invented. We've seen the first film, but we're still shooting it like theater, right? And then one day somebody invented the cut or the zoom or moving a camera. That was crazy, right? And that's how the kind of the language of cinema was invented. I think we're at that spot right now, trying to figure out what's this new language of interaction.
And you laid out for us the vision that you have to build the hardware, the software, and where all these devices, everything is going to move towards. So what are some things that you think might stall it, might stop it? Is it possible to stop it, or is this a natural evolution? But what are some of the things that you see are some hurdles that need to be overcome that people should be aware of as they're entering this industry?
I think, you know, a big one is the cultural change. And we've seen that, you know, with Google kind of making some mistakes in terms of how to communicate what this new device that you put on your face is, and they got some backlash from various groups. And so I think, you know, we cannot underestimate the impact, the cultural, the ethical impact on these kind of things. Even the law, you know, in some cases, police officers have not arrested, but, you know, gave tickets to people that were driving with smart glasses, because the law is completely open there. So there's a lot of regulatory work that still need to be done. But yeah, I think the cultural impact is probably the biggest one that must not be underestimated. Other than that, you know, you mentioned before that you may not be the first one to try on those retina displays, and I can understand that. But I think, like in any new technology, it takes a little bit of time for the masses to really accept certain things, and that's going to take a few years. Then, you know, it's something that was said many times about wearables, about smartwatches, that these devices are the most personal devices that we've ever had. The personal computer was not personal at all, right? It was beige, it was under the desk, nobody cared about how it looked. But now it's you, you know, it's like your clothes, it's like your jewelry, and it has to look good, and that requires the fashion industry and the technology industry to really mesh together and understand each other in a way that they never had before. Apple is great at that, so I think that's probably where we're going to expect some of those successes to come from. But I think it's something that applies to every single technology company out there.
Wonderful. So one final question, Ori. Innovation. How do you define innovation?
Oh, that's too big for me. But I think it's just something that you never settle for the status quo. You look at, you know, maybe big companies or big industries, successful industries, and you always question that, and you kind of look for, you know, how can we make things better, even if it's against the current wave or against the mainstream. That's for me is innovation, constantly looking for ways to improve things against the stream.
Well, Ori, thank you so much. And everyone, take a look at augmentedreality.org and the AW conference. Ori, tell us again the URL for AW.
It's Augmented World Expo, or in short, awe2015.com. And by the way, we want to use this opportunity to give everybody a special discount code, Superpowers19, and you can get a really cheap exhibit-only ticket for just $19. So everybody in the area should definitely not miss it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ori. Greatly appreciate you being on the show.
It was wonderful to be here. Thanks.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us here at RCR TV and on U2U Connect Show. Stay tuned for more coming here from RCR TV. Come back to our channel often. Cheers.